Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Louise Aylman.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, before listing my engagements, I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in sending our profound condolences to the families and friends of Senior Aircraftsman Graham Livingston and Senior Aircraftsman Gary Thompson, who were killed in Afghanistan on Sunday 13th April, and Trooper Robert Pearson, who was killed in Afghanistan on Monday the 21st of April. We owe them and all others who have lost their lives a deep debt of gratitude. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure also I speak for the whole House when I say how sad we were to learn of the death of Gwyneth Dunwoody. She was a great parliamentarian. She was the longest-serving female member of this House. She will be greatly missed from her usual seat in this chamber, and our thoughts and our prayers are with her family. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in the House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we can call this session Prime Minister's U-turns rather than Prime Minister's questions. Can I join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to Senior Aircraftman Graham Livingston and Senior Aircraftman Gary Thompson, who were killed in Afghanistan on Sunday the 13th of April, and to Trooper Robert Pearson, who was killed this Monday. The whole of this country owes them a great debt of gratitude. I also associate my party with the Prime Minister's warm words about Gwyneth Dunwoody. She was the very model of an independent backbencher and select committee chairman. She spoke her mind, she had no truck with political correctness, she was courageous in her political beliefs, and she... Yes. I can remember exactly where she sat. But she was never afraid to hold any government to account if she thought that they were doing the wrong thing, and she'll be sorely missed on all sides of the House of Commons. The Prime Minister's emergency announcement about income tax this morning represents a massive loss of authority. This morning, we have had panic concessions before coming to the House of Commons. We were told there would be no back down. We've had a back down. We were told he couldn't rewrite the budget. He's rewriting the budget. We were told there'd be no concessions. There are now massive concessions. So will he tell us, is he making these changes because he thought he'd lose the vote next week?
We've said for some time that we want to do more to help people on low income. If I also say to him this, his party policy 2 years ago was to abolish the 10p rate. Last year it was to abstain on the 10p rate. This year it is to keep the 10p rate. They are the no, don't know, yes party. They cannot make up their mind what they're going to do. We will be consistent in our desire to tackle child poverty.
Consistent? Does the Prime Minister have any idea what a pathetic figure he cuts today? He is making these changes because he thought he'd lose the vote. Or is this like the general election that he cancelled even though he thought he was going to win it? Isn't he just taking people for fools once again? Why won't he admit it? He's not making these changes because he thinks they're right. He's not making these changes because he wants to help the people that he hurt. He's making these changes because he was frightened of losing a vote. Why not admit it? Why not be straight with people?
I see his newfound...
What this is about is weakness, dithering and indecision from the Prime Minister. He talks about the central issue. Let us deal with the central issue. Why did all this begin? This began because, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, he stood there and presented a tax-con budget to try and wrong-foot the opposition, to try and pose as a tax cutter, to try and win a few cheap headlines in the newspapers, and he did all of it. He did all of it on the back of 5.3 million of the poorest people in our country. Will he admit now? Will he admit now that budget was a gross miscalculation, that budget was immoral, and will he apologise for the tax-con budget?
Because everybody now agrees that the 10p rate is not the best way of tackling poverty. And the Conservative Party agreed with that 2 years ago. They abstained on the vote a year ago, and now are supporting the 10p rate, and nobody believes their credibility in that matter. Let me just quote what the Leader of the Opposition said. That he wanted to simplify all our tax rate and produce one ban, somewhere around 20 pence. That applied to spending, saving, capital gains and income, and abolish all endless release and credit. The policy he announced in 2002 was not just cutting the 10p rate, but abolishing tax credits and abolishing allowances. That is not a party that cares about the poor. That is a party that put more people in poverty.
As ever, he was about to thump 5.3 million of the poorest people in our country, and he's scrabbling around with policy documents trying to find some excuses. As ever, no apology, no admission of guilt, just a U-turn to try and save his skin. Doesn't this climb down tell us all you need to know about this government? It is always about politics, not about policy. It's always about calculation, not about conviction. It's always about his self-interest, not the national interest. Does this Prime Minister think his reputation can ever recover?
Mr. Speaker, why does he not address the central issue, how we lift people out of low incomes and poverty in this country? Why does he not admit that as a result of our tax credits, which we opposed, 3 million children are in families with incomes of more than £80 a week in addition to 1997? And why does he not admit that there are 2 million pensioners because of the pension credit with incomes £40 more than 1997? None of that could be achieved by the 10p rate. It can only be achieved by tax credits, which he opposes. And why doesn't he recognise that under this government, 1 million pensioners have been taken out of poverty, nearly 1 million children taken out of poverty, 3 million more jobs created. We are nearer to full employment than at any time in our history, and none of them could have happened if we'd followed the policies of the Conservative Party.
The truth is that under this government, yes, I'll tell you what is more, under this government there are 600,000 more people in extreme poverty than when they came to power. The Prime Minister talks about the central issue. The central issue here is his massive loss of authority. Was there ever anything more humiliating than a Prime Minister breaking off his talks with the President, asking for an outside line in the White House to beg with one of his PPSs not to resign? This is what Labour MPs, they should be quiet and listen. This is what Labour MPs are saying.
Let the Leader of the Opposition speak. The Honourable Lady's too noisy. Far too noisy. And shows that Lord High Chancellor, that's his title now. He's too noisy as well. He's quiet.
It's not often you have to give the Lord Chancellor an ASBO. This is what Labour MPs are saying about their Prime Minister. He's losing touch. He doesn't know what fairness is. He needs to see the world through the eyes of voters. He's like a scared rabbit in the headlights. The Labour peer Lord Desai said the Prime Minister's leadership style is like porridge. Another week like this and it'll be Cheerios. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that the Labour Party have finally worked out that they've got a loser, not a leader?
Mr. Speaker, why does he never address the central issues?
Order allows the Prime Minister to be heard. The Prime Minister, order.
Mr. Speaker, does he never address the central issue? Child benefit increased from £11 to £20 under this government. The poorest child in the country, £27 under the Conservatives, £75 under Labour. Tackling poverty so that nearly 1 million children are out of poverty, 1 million pensioners out of poverty. These are the things we're doing. Now, here is the choice. A Labour government that supports a minimum wage, supports tackling child poverty, pensioner poverty, and has got 3 million people in jobs, and a Conservative Party that would go for 10 billion of tax cuts, the priority going to stamp duty on shares and not to the poorest in the country. I know what side the country is on.
The central issue is the Prime Minister's weakness and his inability to hold to a position for longer than half an hour. That is what the humiliating climb down today is all about. But isn't the real lesson of today this? The only time when this Prime Minister listens to people is when he's faced with personal defeat. And isn't that the lesson that everyone in this country, in London and beyond, should think about on May the 1st? That if they want to send a message to this weak and incompetent government that enough is enough,